Okay, a very good morning to all of you. Welcome to our symposium. We're going to get started in a few minutes. In the meantime, just be finishing your last cups of coffee and give us a shout out. Use the question and answer box. Let us know who you are and where you're from. Don't forget, we've got the conference wall as well that you can visit, have a look at, post your thoughts. We'll be starting in a few minutes. For those of you just joining, we're going to start in a few minutes. Very warm welcome to today's symposium. We've got a great program for you this morning. While we're waiting to get started, if you'd like to tell us in the question and answer box where you're from and who you are, that would be great. Don't forget, you can visit the conference wall. We've got a couple of polls for you, one on the conference wall and the other one in your joining instructions. So if you haven't already done those polls, click on the link and answer our questions, and we'll be starting in a few minutes.
هي
For those of you who are just joining, we're going to get started in a few minutes. Please use the question and answer box. Let us know who you are and where you're from. And while we're waiting to get started, for the last few people to join us, do have a look at the conference wall. Lots of interesting posts there from every country around the region. And we've got a couple of polls for you, one of which is on the conference wall in the first post. And the other poll is in your joining instructions. So do tell us what you think, please. We'll be starting in a few minutes. Got colleagues from Palestine, from Egypt, from Morocco, Lots of messages coming in now from Lebanon. People joining us on their mobile phones. Jordan, hello Jordan. Tunisia, Lebanon, Bahrain, Jeddah, Iraq, Bahrain, Morocco, Lebanon, so many. Okay then, we're ready to start. Thank you so much for joining us. Please keep telling us in the question and answer box where you're from and who you are. Don't forget about our 2 polls. We're interested to know what you think, of course. First poll is in the first post on the conference wall, and please visit the conference wall if you haven't already done so. And the other link is in your joining instructions, and I think it would be good if you had your joining instructions handy so that you can follow as we go through today's great sessions. So, a few introductions to start with. My name is John Shackleton. I work for the British Council. I'm based in Cairo, and I look after our teacher development work for the region. I'm, as always, joined by my colleagues Noura Al-Sabah, who's from the British Council in Bahrain, Hala Ahmed, who you all know as Ask Hala, of course, joining us from Cairo too, and Temar Shura, who is making all of this work for us. So, very warm welcome from the British Council team. We have many other people who are joining us today, and we'll be introducing those as we go along. So, could we have the next slide, please? So that's what we're looking at today. We're asking ourselves 2 what we would think of as fundamental questions 1 year on from the beginning of the pandemic. And we're joined by lots of people from around the region who've been involved with us in the Teacher Networking Initiative, and we'll be getting their opinions, their expert opinions, their practical opinions, their on-the-ground opinions of these 2 what we would say are fundamental questions in response to the pandemic, but also in response to that remote learning future. So, first question, is remotely delivered professional development for teachers, is it effective? We've all gone online more because of the pandemic, and we're asking the question and we're answering the question today. Is it effective? Does it constitute effective learning? And the second question, everybody has gone online, of course, but not everybody has gone online because not everybody can get online. So we're asking the second fundamental question today, how can we help those teachers, practically speaking, who cannot access the internet or have limited access to the internet? So there are 2 fundamental questions, and we'll be relying on you to provide your insights, your opinions, your thoughts on those 2 questions. Next slide, please. So with those 2 questions in mind, we have 3 sessions for you today. We're very lucky to be joined by Dr. Steve Maan from the University of Warwick, and he'll be talking through the results and the key insights from recent research that he's carried out here in the Middle East and North Africa, asking specifically, does or can professional development for teachers that's delivered remotely, can it be effective? Really interesting, very interesting insights. And we'll be asking teachers and teacher educators who are part of the Teacher Networking Initiative to give their views on Steve's report as well. Then the second session, it's a panel discussion, and we're very lucky to be joined by colleagues and teachers and teacher educators from the Yemen, from Iraq, and from Sudan as well, who'll be telling us about what the situation is in terms of access to the internet, connectivity, the ability to get online in those three countries, what the challenges are, and what some of the solutions are that they would like to put forward, or have indeed put forward. And then finally, the last session, session number 3, we'll be talking about the Teacher Networking Initiative in more detail. We'll be having a look back at what we've done over the last year or so, and the last 6 months in particular. And we'll also be talking about what our plans are for the next year, and we'll be talking about the Ask Hala webinar program, where we've asked you to suggest some topics for that, along with our suggestions. And we'll be talking about our program for supporting community of practice leaders as well. So that's the program. 3 really, really interesting sessions. And we'd like now to move on to the first session. So if we can have the next slide, please. Okay, we'll just be a couple of minutes while we arrange for Steve to join us. 1 second. Okay, life would not be the same, would it, without the technical problems that we encounter from time to time? So we're about to start. Just bear with us a second. Okay then, so we're very pleased to be able to welcome Dr. Steve Maan, who's recently carried out some research into the really, really essential question of is online learning for teachers, is that effective, and he's taken a very good look across the Middle East and North Africa region to come up with some very interesting key insights that will help us to answer that question. Okay then. Steve, great that you're with us here today. It's a privilege to take this opportunity to talk to you about the recent research report that you've just completed. So we've got a few questions for you, if you don't mind.
Not at all. Fire away, John.
Great. Okay, thank you. So first of all then, question number one. What is the focus of your report?
Well, first of all, it's focused on a particular area. It's focused on impact and effectiveness of remote online learning in the Middle East and North Africa region. So it's focused pretty specifically on that topic and in that place. There's a literature review which covers important themes related to COVID, remote and online learning, and some of the current evidence we have about maximising professional development effectiveness. So there's 4 programmes that we're looking at. In all 4, we're interested in primarily this shift to remote learning that we've had to all engage with as a response to the pandemic. And in a little bit more detail, there's the MENA-wide Community of Practice Leader Programme, the Egyptian National Teacher Training Programme, which is in its 2nd year, and then the Teaching for Success Syria and the Teaching for Success Palestine. So there's basically 4 cases looking at this effectiveness of remote PD.
Great. Okay, so the focus is on professional development delivered remotely for teachers. And you've been looking at case studies here in the Middle East and North Africa region, and you've looked at also at the existing literature around remote learning in general. And how did you actually carry out the research then? What kinds of things did you do to get the data and the insights?
Well, first of all, it was important to get primary data because a lot of research in this area is kind of an amalgamation of different survey reports that have been done in the past, which are usually based on questionnaire data. So we wanted to adopt a mixed method approach, which is basically just combining at least one element of a quantitative approach with elements of a qualitative research. And I'm primarily more interested in qualitative research because I think it gives you more detail of what actually is happening. So we tried to use the best of both, I guess, and have a survey which gives us some numbers and some percentages about how people feel about professional development online. But also we wanted to have focus groups and interviews to really dig down into people's experience and hear the voices of a range of teachers and teacher educators that have been trying to do the best they can in these difficult circumstances. And I suppose it's worth just saying that involves a number of steps. I was particularly interested in looking at recordings of online participation in synchronous Zoom sessions usually, but sometimes in Teams. Talking and interviewing program managers to get a good idea of the background and the history of the projects. Then we did the literature review, as we've said, then focus groups and interviews, and those fed into a survey design, which we then distributed. And once I'd got all the data together, just looked at it and developed a thematic coding. I used a couple of pieces of software, which, if anyone's interested, you could email me. But, one of them is Otter AI, which is very good at generating transcripts and gives you some coding. And then obviously I've worked collaboratively with the British Council team in the 4 countries to try and generate a report which does justice to the details of what's been happening. It's been very exciting and a very enjoyable collaborative process.
Well, it's great that you've enjoyed it. So a mixed methodology then, qualitative and quantitative design. So that included reviewing project documents, talking to project managers and program managers, but also the focus group discussions and observation of sessions, as well as online surveys. And from all of that, then what kind of key insights did you pick up on?
Well, I suppose the overall one is that professional development can be effective for teachers, even if they're not used to this kind of way of working on their professional development. Of course, there are significant challenges that needed to be overcome, and they were experienced. So it's important to see that effectiveness in the context of some of those constraints. But I think what we've seen overall is that teacher educators and teachers have been resilient, collaborative, pretty patient and innovative really in what they've managed to achieve in these communities of practice and teacher activity groups. I think the qualitative data shows that being part of one of these groups has been an important site for sharing ideas, materials, resources, but also a really important source of emotional support in these challenging times. The survey data, I think, shows that teachers prefer face-to-face. If you were going to have a black and white choice between face-to-face and remote PD, they prefer face-to-face. But there's a significant minority, something like 25% who prefer it. And I think when you dig down a bit deeper, you find that people might actually prefer a more hybrid or mixed model. So I think another finding was that teachers have been able to work on developing their digital literacy, being able to try out tools and ideas online. So I think there's overall a greater understanding of digital pedagogy and what your options are in the classroom. And also we found other things like it's important in teacher activity groups to define roles and maybe share things round a bit, and that video can play a really important role with short clips as examples to bring the classroom into the remote environment. And another finding, I think, is that a regular structure is important. So participants know what to expect and you build up these patterns and routines over the week. So I think those are kind of some of the more interesting findings of the whole project, John.
Okay, there's a lot in there, of course, and perhaps just unpick a little bit a few of those things. But you know, for listeners, for our audience here today, of course, you can look in more detail at these key insights through Steve's report. I was interested what you were saying about being part of a group in the way that contributes to resilience in difficult times. I think that's a really important point, and something that we've been very conscious of in developing the teacher networking initiative. And I think also the attitudes towards remote learning amongst teachers. And it's very interesting what you were saying about preferences. I think that, if I understood that correctly, that given the choice, then teachers would probably prefer face-to-face, but over time have become more confident, you're talking about digital literacy skills, in operating successfully within a remote learning environment. So, and I think that's something maybe we can come on to when we look at what the future might hold. What you were saying about blended learning and bringing together different spaces, different channels for learning that are both face-to-face and remote. So that was really good. And the points about structure, and roles and responsibilities within these remote groups also really interesting. Maybe your overall conclusion then that you started with at the beginning, when you said that remote learning for teachers in terms of helping their professional development can be effective then. So what kinds of things do you think contribute to this effectiveness? When if you're a teacher and you are planning to do some remote learning, or if you are organizing some remote learning, what kinds of things do you think you would need to consider to make it effective?
Okay, well, I think that's a really interesting question. I think I'll probably divide that into two parts. If we talk about some overall conclusions first, and then I'll talk about some maybe more specific considerations. But as you say, really, the overall conclusion is that teachers can learn effectively through remote PD. They can enhance their understanding, providing there's adequate induction, clear explanation, and good ongoing support from a facilitator or a teacher educator or somebody who's going to play that role of encouraging and making sure that it works as well as it can do. I think synchronous sessions are particularly valuable for fostering peer-to-peer interaction and dialogue. They can be, they're not always, and I think there's still a balance between using them to give a lecture or give a lot of content, and those sessions which are more reflective, there's more dialogue, there's more sharing. So I think the key for professional development is really the synchronous elements and getting those right, because that's what really motivates the teachers, I think, and improves outcomes. But I think the data in all four cases shows that teachers can work effectively and that they appreciate the value of working online. The levels of satisfaction are consistently high across the four cases, and of course they're slightly different. Like in Syria, people have been working online for a good many years now, and they haven't had any choice. And to some extent in Palestine too, where travel can be difficult, then remote learning has been really important. So perhaps there hasn't been such a major pivot in those areas. But I think moving on to the second part, you asked about important considerations. If you're organising professional development, if that's part of your role, the first thing I'd say is to go back to something we've talked about, to provide a regular structure in the synchronous session, have a review, a warmer, an input, some dialogue, some demonstrations, a video, some tasks, and if you can, break out discussions, because there's a lot of evidence now that like an hour online is a long time without some breakout sessions for variety, but also for peer-to-peer interaction. Give the teachers an opportunity to actually experience digital tools in the synchronous session, and then encourage them to try them out in their classrooms. There's been a lot of good practice in that area. I think embracing a flipped model is really important. Some tasks need to be done before the synchronous session. The really effective groups are where people are coming to the session when they've already thought about something. They've already read something or explored, tried something out in the classroom, or they've watched a video, and you're coming with something to say. So that flipped element, I think, is really important. We've talked about specific roles. I think that's really good. Maybe one person to create notes, another person to run a blog, another person to organise the Facebook page if you had one. But I think if everybody feels involved, then there's more chance that people won't feel that overburdened, and I think that's important. I've talked about integrating video. I think that is something that is important in any professional development, but particularly online, where variety and having a change of focus is is really key. And along that line, some of the most exciting work we've seen is where people are integrating quizzes and polls, things like Kahoot and Mentimeter, WordWall, Nearpod, lots of different tools, which again change the focus, get people to look at a task and think about it and complete it, and then talk a little bit more. So I think that's been really important. One of the amazing things for me is to see how prevalent WhatsApp is. I mean, I kind of knew that WhatsApp from the literature is a big deal as a plan B sometimes where things go wrong and people can't connect. So you use WhatsApp to at least be able to invite some comment and keep people kind of included in the group. But also all that stuff that happens outside the group, to share links, and I saw this today and there's a webinar next Tuesday. All those kinds of things are really important. I'd finish with one thing is one thing that we know is that we were rushed into this in many cases, and there wasn't always enough induction about how to use the tools, how to use Teams, for example, how to use Zoom. And I think that if you're planning work online, it's always good to think about the training needs first and maybe use screencast or find some YouTube. There's plenty of stuff out there to show people the basic functions of the tools that you're planning to use.
Great. Again, so much in there that needs further discussion and further looking at. You talked a little bit about challenge. I think we just experienced some challenge of working remotely. We may have lost you there when you were talking about the first part of your answer. I think one of the points about the last point that you made in particular around induction, and I think one of the things that we've really realized in this, as you called it, rush to online delivery, is that it's often that lack of preparedness that's been particularly challenging, so that teachers and learners don't have necessarily the digital literacy skills, the knowledge of some of those platforms and tools that you were talking about, in order to access the content and navigate the content and learn from the content successfully. So I think that point in particular around being prepared and induction, I think, are really, really key to all of this. And part of being prepared, I think, and it's something that you alluded to earlier around blended learning. So this mixture of different kinds of channels that can be used for teachers to learn, but also for teachers to teach. I think that's really important. You talked about the flipped classroom. So bringing in asynchronous platforms, using synchronous platforms, using face-to-face in some kind of effective and well-considered combination, I think is really, really, really important points. And I was going to ask you on that subject. Do you think that it's it's that mixture of different models, different channels that you think will be a key element of our future working lives, that we're using different things for different purposes, but essentially, and this is a theme that we've returned to a lot through the Teacher Networking Initiative, that everything has changed, but that also nothing has changed, in that we're looking to support good teaching, effective pedagogy, engaging learners successfully in the classroom, that we will continue with those principles, but just using different ways of arriving at the same kind of outcome that we've always wanted. That was rather a long question, sorry.
No, I think that's absolutely right. I think you've raised, I think, the challenge, which is to use the technology that we have. I suppose in really simple terms, a lot of us have had a crash course in what's available because we've needed to carry on with our teaching, with our professional development. So we now know a little bit more about which tools can help us to engage and motivate. And I think that we're unlikely to return to exactly the same normal that we had before. But even then, there was a lot of realization that training events happen and then there's not much follow-up afterwards, or that a training event happens and people are not, they come to the event and they're not really warmed up. So I think even if you were primarily going to do a face-to-face course, you might think about how you could use asynchronous and synchronous platforms before the training event to get people warmed up, to get people thinking about the topic, and maybe collect a little bit of data from their class, or maybe interview another teacher, or talk to a focus group of their students, just to find out how they're feeling about the learning. So I think that we've realized that for quite a long time, that we shouldn't see training as a one-off face-to-face event. But I think you've picked out some of the areas that I think are really key. Is we know that there are a lot of teachers that are not here today with us in the room, and they weren't the ones that I talked to for the research, because really the only people that we get to talk to are those people who are connected and who are reasonably digitally literate. But of course, there's a lot more that aren't, and we need to target some of those teachers, raise their confidence, and give them more of those basic digital skills, so that they don't feel left behind, that they feel more comfortable. So I think that's a big challenge for us, but one that we need to take on. And then we've got the more specific things like induction for groups that we've talked about, this big issue of how can we best achieve what we want to in a hybrid and flip way. And going back to the point right at the beginning, I think we will have maybe predominantly face-to-face sometimes if we can, but there's still the elements of hybrid and flip which will help us do better in that environment. And there will still be plenty of remote PD for geographical and economic reasons. It may be the best option for particular projects. So it's unlikely that remote learning will disappear after COVID. And I think, as well as the hybrid and the flipped element, we've now got a much greater understanding of which tools promote interaction in real time in this slightly constrained digital environment. How do we use the chat function? How do we use breakout rooms? How can we go off and do a word wall quiz? And these things have really helped us to get a better idea about how we can make things interesting, a little bit fun, a little bit collaborative, and at the end of the day, whether we're face to face or we're online, we want to enjoy each other's companies, feel reasonably relaxed, and be able to share our views on teaching or training or whatever we're involved in. So I think those are the priorities, John.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I think the idea of collaborative learning, of sharing and enjoying, those things are absolutely key. The different options, the better understanding of what tools and platforms work best in what kind of different combination, desperately important as well, of course. And I think, you've raised a point that we're, in a sense, trying to begin to address this morning, which is about the digital divide. And you're quite right. We're talking to people who already are in the digital space. So the challenge that you quite rightly say that we need to grasp is how do we involve those teachers who have low or no connectivity, who perhaps don't have the confidence, even if they do have connectivity, to really get into the digital space and make the most of it for their own learning, but also for the learning of the students that the learners that they're responsible for. Brilliant. Okay, so thank you so much indeed, Steve. Great talking to you this morning, and we hope you're going to stay with us for the rest of the sessions today. And of course, standard reading, Steve Maan's report on understanding the effectiveness of remotely delivered professional development for teachers. Thank you very much, Steve. We'll see you later.
Thanks a lot, John.
Okay, all the best. Bye. Okay, thank you very much indeed, Steve. Really enjoyed listening to you. We'd like now to take a few questions and to talk a little bit about some of the comments, some of the many comments that have been coming in. Lots of comments around what the preference is. Is it face-to-face or is it remote learning? Lots of people are saying things like, well, remote learning, it's given us the opportunity to be innovative. It's given us the opportunity to learn new skills. So a variety of opinion there about constraint and opportunity that the pandemic has brought about. One theme that we've come back to again and again and again is the idea of motivation. Okay, I hope you can all hear me now. Thank you very much for Steve for being with us today. He's able to answer questions in the chat, so please keep those comments coming in. Lots of interesting comments. Thank you very much indeed about advantages and disadvantages, about opportunities and constraints of face-to-face versus remote learning. A main theme around motivation, very important, and that has really been an aspect of professional development for teachers that has really come into sharp focus through the effects of the pandemic. How do you motivate teachers to grow professionally? More comments around how face-to-face compares to remote learning, and face-to-face, all sorts of other clues to understanding facial expressions, etc. And one of the main themes that's been coming in through the comments, of course, is about technology and about infrastructure, about being left behind. And we're going to be looking at that in more detail in the next session. Okay, please keep those comments coming in. Hala, I was wondering whether you had anything to say around any of the comments that have come in. We've lost Hala. No doubt she will be back. What we're going to do now, then we're going to move on to some of the responses to Steve's key insights from his report. And we're very lucky to be joined by Marwa El-Haddad from Bahrain, Ines Ames from the Lebanon, Masuma El-Tamar from Bahrain, Khalid El-Barati from the Yemen, and Mariam Al-Hamad from Bahrain. And we're going to be listening to what they think of some of these key insights that Steve has identified in his report. Okay, thanks very much. Next slide then, please.
Since the beginning of the pandemic, teachers and educators had to change their routine and plans from face-to-face interaction and paper tasks to online lessons and assignments. They had to face numerous of challenges, especially those who lack the digital literacy. COP helped teachers around the MENA to overcome these obstacles by standing together as educators, sharing ideas to make the most of the lessons, materials to have more interactive classes, and resources to reach ourselves. Above all, the emotional support and socializing with experienced and talented educators around the MENA have enlarged our social circle during a social distance period. Teachers feel the need to develop their digital skills and try new techniques. Now, after learning and practicing it with their colleagues, they feel more confident. Not to mention the flexibility of the program by having synchronous and asynchronous sessions between the teachers. Personally speaking, being a COP leader has helped me know the needs in my organization and try to fulfill it to have a better educational experience. After applying the COP in my school, it helped me and the teachers mastering some skills and encouraging others to search for more methods, strategies, and material and more to support each other inside the school and in other schools as well.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Marwa. Could we have the next slide, please?
When it comes to the importance of synchronous sessions in fostering peer interaction, it is worthy to mention that synchronous sessions provide a space for teachers and teachers educators to exchange experiences of best practices in enhancing students' motivation, engagement, and learning outcomes. This is usually done by speaking about the challenges faced by teachers while teaching remotely, solutions found, and by presenting case studies. In such an interaction, teachers will have the opportunities to think of strategies, tools, applications, activities, and assessment forms that can be effective in increasing students' motivation and enhancing learning outcomes. They can think of what the students like and what they don't like regarding the used applications and tools. Teachers can think in an innovative way of how to start their session, how to go through it, and how to end it in a way that makes sure that the students are always engaged in the teaching learning process. Synchronous sessions can be a space for teachers to suggest action plans toward a more motivating teaching approach to be applied with their students. They can conduct those plans and get back to their peers to discuss points of strength and improve points of weakness. Planning as such will even help each teacher on his/her behalf to adapt the plan to fit into her specific teaching learning context. Peer interaction will help teachers to reflect on their teaching by having teachers criticizing their methods of teaching from different perspectives. This will help teachers to evaluate their practices and tend toward more motivating models. Teachers can think on how to raise the students' readiness toward an online or remote learning. What helps the students learning to be at its best, what pre-tasks are to be given before teaching, what post-tasks are to be assigned, and what tasks are to be performed while teaching and learning remotely. Even teachers can think of what can be done synchronously and what is to be done during the asynchronous sessions in an attempt to raise the students' academic and psychological readiness. In the synchronous sessions, teachers can think on how to make students decision maker in selecting or suggesting tools and applications that they found useful in their learning and thus fostering an autonomous learning. This and much more can be done to enhance students' motivation and learning outcomes in peer teaching.
Thank you very much, Ines. Thank you. We'll be taking some comments on that at the end. Can we have the next slide, please?
Hello, everybody. This is Masuma At-Tammar from Jedhaf Secondary Girls School. It is my pleasure to participate in this symposium. During the rapid and sudden transition to remote teaching, supporting students and families has been the first and foremost priority for many schools. But what about supporting teachers? Teachers who are put into this hasty transition without any chance to even catch their breaths. They are supposed to continue teaching using almost new platforms and new online tools. They may be trying them for the first time. Teachers are used to a certain type of teaching for years, and they got their training in the same way too, which is face-to-face. Changing that suddenly must have created some kind of anxiety, especially that they had to adapt abruptly. Plus, they had no choice but to accept the new situation. Also, they were thrown in the field by themselves without any kind of guidance, especially at the beginning of the shutdown. Some of my experienced colleagues, whom are in the teaching field for more than 15 years, started to question their abilities and capabilities. However, bit by bit, they started to gain their trust in themselves in this crazy chaos. Personally, as a leader, I focused much on encouraging them to take it easy and telling them that they are doing what they can, which is enough in this stage. This technique helped them accept the remote training too. Here now comes talking about this kind of training. I personally had issues with it. I always preferred face-to-face training. It gives the teacher the chance to interact with the trainer as well as the trainees freely and easily. The interactive discussions were always preferred by a lot of teachers. However, gradually, I started accepting the new way. I even started to like it too. Playing the video back when missing something is the most pleasant, splendid, and luxurious opportunity.
Thank you very much indeed, Matsuma. We'll take some comments. There are quite a lot coming in now. Thank you very much. Okay, next slide, please.
Hello, everyone. It's a great honor to talk to you. This is Khalid Al-Barati, an EL teacher and teacher trainer TAIZ Yemen. In this talk, and based on my work as a regional volunteer leader, I'm going to reflect on the topic of giving teachers opportunities to experience digital tools in synchronous sessions and encouraging them to try them in their classrooms. I can say that during our participation in the COP initiative, we're driven to experience a number of interactive digital tools. As I could remember, we tried Kahoot, Quizzes, Pollmaker, Padlet, Mentimeter, and many others. These digital tools were really effective as they create a sense of interaction and collaboration among participants. Generally speaking, these digital tools are highly motivating as they enhance learning in synchronous sessions by increasing participants' motivation levels. Using these digital tools wisely and in real-time activities is a great way to engage and inspire both teachers and students to demonstrate and develop their skills and abilities while competing with each other in engaging team player games. They provide ongoing motivation as they encourage participations from all teachers, even the most reticent ones. After careful evaluation of the available tools and how to apply them to my students' needs, I opted for digital tools. Kahoot, WordWall, Quizzes, and Padlet. These platforms share features that allow teachers to use them in the classrooms as well as for the teacher training. They are adaptable for fun and interactive activities for both teachers and students. For me, I don't need to use them very often, but if I need to complement my lessons with the school adopted materials or the materials that I create, these four digital tools are my support. For example, Padlet is a great tool as it allows users to collaborate, create, and learn from each other. It allows teachers to upload content and give feedback to the students all on one platform. I can say that in both synchronous and asynchronous sessions, students can work on Padlet during breakout room sessions. It's good if teachers give students time to discuss a topic in breakout rooms. For me, I use Padlet to post questions or ask my COP teachers to write their reflections. Kahoot can be used to wrap a session of teacher development. When I use Kahoot during teacher development sessions, I feel that I'm demonstrating the platform in a practical way. I think it's important that teachers experience Kahoot and other tools that students will use to gain familiarity and anticipate anything that can be added to their lesson plans. WordWall, just like Kahoot, is loaded with content, which can be used anytime by any teacher and students. I like using both platforms during my teacher development sessions. They can also be used as reinforcement activities for homework or homework. In my opinion, the greatest feature of this platform is its flexibility. It allows teachers to use the same content in different ways. As practical tools for remote language teaching, Kahoot, WordWall, Quizzes, and Padlet are the four digital tools that provide the extra materials that I can apply to my lessons. All these made us realize the necessity of giving COP teachers opportunities to experience these digital tools with their students. I personally tried them in my COP during my conducted the synchronous sessions via WhatsApp. In fact, I admit that I couldn't conduct any synchronous sessions in my COP due to the bad internet connection in my country. So I could apply a strategy to use WhatsApp in a way that appears not only a synchronous platform, but also a convenient interactive synchronous tool. So, based on my experience in using these digital tools in my sessions, I could actually confirm that teachers should experience them and use them in their classrooms and with their students. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Khalid. We hope to have time for a few comments as well that we'll deal with before the end of this first session. Next slide then, please.
Walt Disney says we keep moving forward, opening new doors and doing new things because we're curious, and curiosity keeps leading us down new paths. Can hybrid model help sustain professional development beyond a training event? Is a combination of two formats more effective? Face-to-face with its real-time discussions, presentations, immediate interactions, deeper relationships, and the online that provides innovation, collaboration, and content mastery. Teachers prefer face-to-face training. They often say that they don't like hybrid training, maybe because they are so used to face-to-face training. Yet, there are so many features that makes it so effective. The hybrid training can offer unique opportunities that blends the features of face-to-face and online training, like flexibility. Not only flexibility of time, but also of material, facilities used, variations of engagement, and it can also create room for teachers to explore, search, and can give them the chance to watch things again and again till they reach content mastery. They would have space to try things and to interact with each other and with the training content. And all this will make such training very rich in all aspects. Yet, a lot of planning is needed to ensure that hybrid works well. There must be SMART goals that structure how the course is delivered in a way that helps teachers digest and apply the training. There must be some authentic learning projects that encourage teachers to plan together, try new things together, reflect, and have some problem-solving sessions. Trainers need to approach planning carefully, though, to decide which activities to assign for face-to-face and which to assign for online. They must be aware how to have the right mixture that allows teachers to interact with the content and with each other to have the best impact, leading to more effective learning and creating powerful learning opportunities and more commitment. Now let me tell you this very short story. Two guys who just met at a training class are driving through the city looking for a place to have lunch. The guy driving is running every red light. The other guy is starting to freak out and says, "Hey dude, what the hell are you doing going through these red lights?" The guy driving says, "It's okay, my brother-in-law does it all the time." The passenger says, "Well, it's not okay with me. Let me out up here." They drive a little further up the road and the driver stops at a green light. The passenger says, "Why are you stopping? The light is green." The driver says, "My brother-in-law might be coming through." Hybrid training is just like passing traffic lights. Trainers should not only teach colors, thinking of training through face-to-face or online, but they should ensure that what is being learned will help the teachers reach the deserved destination. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Mariam. Clear message there to look out for your brother-in-law if we're driving. Some really interesting points from Steve and from Marwa and from Inas, Masuma, Khalid and Mariam. Thank you so much for that. Lots of comments coming in. Many of the comments, I think, to do with one really key word, which is support. And that whether that's support for teachers that's part of well-being, that kind of support, whether it's support in terms of digital literacy skills in order to get into the online space in the first place, whether it's support for adopting the kinds of platforms that Steve and our colleagues have been talking about, making them really effective so that they can motivate their learners to engage, so that some of those concerns that have been raised about the loss of learning that the pandemic has brought about and the decline perhaps in motivation of some learners to learn, that I think we can lump everything together around that word support in those 4 senses of the word. So the emotional support, the digital literacy skills support, the pedagogical support for making the most out of the remote learning options that we have, and the support which we're coming on to now in this next session, No Teacher Left Behind, the support that we need to provide for teachers to help them connect in the first place. And that's what we're going to be talking about in the next session. How can we support teachers who have limited or no internet connection? And we're very fortunate to be joined this morning by, next slide. Next slide. By Ramaz Hashim, who's going to be chairing the panel discussion. She's joining us from the Sudan and be talking about her experience from Sudan, but also from around the world as well. We're joined by colleagues Raja Bazara and Mohammed Al-Kayat from the Yemen, who'll be talking about the situation as regards that all-important thing of connectivity in the Yemen, and by colleagues Ahmed Adnan and Arabia Amjad from Iraq, who will be similarly talking about how the situation is in Iraq. And from that, we're going to try and get not just a picture of what's happening in those three countries, but across the region. What are some of the challenges in terms of connectivity, low connectivity, no connectivity? More importantly, what are some of the solutions to those challenges? And then finally, perhaps the most important of all, what is it that we as individuals can do to help alleviate and overcome some of those barriers? So what I would like to do now is to hand over to Remas, who's going to be telling us a little bit about the digital divide, what it is, what it means, and what it is and what it means in particular in reference to where she works in the Sudan. Remas, over to you.
Thanks a lot, John. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, fellow panelists. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so greetings from Sudan. So today we're going to talk about digital divide and what does it mean. So broadly, digital divide has been defined as the gap between demographics and regions that have access to modern information and communication technology and those who don't or have very restricted access. These technologies, of course, can include telephones, television, computers, internet, and so on. So, but in focus to teachers who are suffering from digital divide are usually in remote locations, or at least that's the case in Sudan and so many other countries in Africa. So what do we mean by remote locations? So remote locations are basically places or regions where they have limited or intermittent electricity, would say from 2 hours or less per day, which is very common in Sudan, by the way, and also where internet accessibility is no more than 2G. So you won't be able to have internet access using a 2G, and where radio coverage is low or even limited. So how can we provide teachers in these remote locations with access to quality education development programs? And how can we ensure that no teacher is left behind? So today I'm going to talk about some of the recent examples from Sudan and where we were able to reach teachers despite their geographical distribution and digital learning limitations. But first, Sudan. Where is Sudan and what do we know about Sudan? Sudan is a country in Northeast Africa. It's bordered by 7 countries. So Egypt, Libya, Chad, Central African Republic, South Sudan, Ethiopia, and Eritrea. It's a very big country. Sudan has a population of 44 million people. But also Sudan's total number of teachers is 560,000 teachers for basic and secondary school. But unfortunately, approximately 38 to 42% of these teachers have no or limited access to internet. So they either have basically no access to internet or very much limited access to internet. And of course, it all depends on electricity, their regions, and so many other factors. So how did we manage to reach these teachers? Well, we did try. So the British Council, in partnership with the European Union, started running a face-to-face continuous professional development program for English, math, and science teachers in 2018, which is the project that I am actually managing in Sudan. Of course, because of COVID-19, we had to halt activities. Most of our activities, or actually all of our activities, were face-to-face trainings. So because of COVID-19 and the restrictions around it, we had to halt activities and stop most of our activities in Sudan. But of course, as everyone else in the world, we had to resort to remote learning. But that actually meant leaving teachers behind. And this is the case for Sudan, and I'm assuming so many other countries. So what did we do? After several fruitful conversations with the Ministry of Education and stakeholders, and bearing in mind the situation in Sudan itself, we then decided on few methods. And when I say that the situation in Sudan, I mean it's very basic. So there are issues around access to electricity, there are issues around access to radio. Of course, because of COVID-19 lockdown, we had there were a lot of issues around physical access to states, but also access to states with ongoing conflict, like Darfur. So there are some regions where basically inaccessible for the project or for our trainers. And because before of COVID-19, we used to invite all the teachers and all the trainers to the capital in Khartoum, where we ran trainings. But because of the restrictions, that was obviously a no. So after so many conversations and planning and replanning, we then decided to choose three methods. One, that we tailored our face-to-face training materials and changed them into hard copies self-access materials. But these self-access materials will be sent, or actually has been sent, to the 8 states of Sudan. We've sent them through Ministry of Education vehicles, UN agencies, humanitarian aid providers, basically anyone who was able to take some papers for us. So that was the only way for us to reach these teachers, because we couldn't get them into any platform or WhatsApp groups or internet, or because of all the issues that I mentioned. That was basically the only way to do it. So then we distributed these self-access hard copies materials to the teachers in their states to be used by them. And then we've asked teachers from the community and from the same neighborhood if they can meet, social distancing and all, if they can meet and talk about their experience using the self-access material, hard copy self-access material. They did actually end up managing to meet in maybe like a day every now and then, to talk about their experience, to share their feedback, to support each other. So in a way, we did create a teacher network, but it wasn't formal because, as I said, Sudan has 560 teachers, and about 40% of them don't have access to internet or electricity or basically all the other ways we were able to reach them. So anyway, the second way we chose was that the Ministry of Education, in partnership also with the World Bank and the British Council as well, we managed to print those self-access materials into newspapers. So each day, obviously, everywhere they distribute daily newspapers. So we blocked like half a page for our self-access material, and we've sent them to all the states. And that was very popular. Teachers were able to purchase these newspapers and use them. And we think that was very successful. And it was the first time we do something like this, and it was the first initiative in Sudan. Another way we reached these teachers was through radio programs. So we took our face-to-face training materials and we tailored them into a radio program. And we had our consultants and trainers recording these material, and then we broadcasted through radio stations, through local and national radio stations, and then we actually even had a call-in shows for people to answer questions, for the consultants to answer questions from the teachers, at least the teachers who were able to listen to the radio show and were able to communicate and interact through mobile phones. These shows were actually very popular. They were very useful for the teachers, and we got so many positive feedback from teachers who were able to join. And then after that, and actually during all these initiatives, very creative initiatives, were all at the same time. And we then developed WhatsApp groups for people who have access or who can access these kind of platforms, so they can discuss and share ideas and recordings and mark each other sheets and all of that through WhatsApp. WhatsApp wasn't that big, again, because of all the issues I mentioned, but the radio show had the best success rate because radio does cover most of Sudan. I would say about 80-something% of all of Sudan. So it was very much accessible to teachers. The main problem was around accessibility to electricity, actually. So they would have, some of the teachers would have radios and they would be able to, but they won't have electricity. So that was the main problem. So this is what we did in Sudan. And I think now we can hear back from the other panelists, and then we can talk about call for action and what do we think we can do and how similar our experiences are. Thank you.
Ramaz, thank you so much. It's so fascinating to understand the kind of conditions that your colleagues, teachers, learners are working in Sudan. Really interesting also to hear, and it's a little bit like the discussion around hybrid and combinations, the combinations of different kinds of media that you use to reach out to teachers, you know, the print materials, broadcast, radio, WhatsApp, and the fundamental problem of electricity, of course, which is a very difficult problem to resolve, of course. It's really interesting to see how in Ethiopia you brought some of those different channels together to reach out to teachers and make sure none of them are left behind.
Just to add something, John, I forgot to refer to the picture that was on my slide. I actually took this picture. This was a couple of months ago. I was in a state called Kordofan, which is by the borders with South Sudan. As you can see, this is an actual classroom. So students are under a tree. There is a blackboard next to the tree, as you can see, and that shed at the background is actually a kindergarten class. So you can imagine these are the situations. This is what the situation looks like. So imagine a teacher in a place like this with no access to internet, no access to electricity, no access to anything basically, and they are still teaching and they are doing their best.
As Amas has just said in response to that picture that says so much more than words can say, that teachers are heroes. A really good, really very good comment, and that resonates, I'm sure, with many of us here working in very difficult conditions. And talking of difficult conditions, we'd like to move on now to talk to our colleagues from Iraq. And we're going to listen to Ahmed Adnan, who works at the British Council in Baghdad, and he's going to be talking about how the situation is for teachers in terms of connectivity in Iraq. Ahmed, welcome. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, John. I would like to thank you all for joining today's session. I will start speaking about the current context in Iraq and the future. Also, my colleague Arabia will mention the challenges and the solution in details. Also apologize for the noise in the background, and this is one of the weak points of using the synchronized platforms. I will start from the e-learning in Iraq in comparison to the other countries. Launching the e-learning system in Iraq come at a later stage. Although education institutes in Iraq are interested in online learning, they have only started using it recently, and that's because as you know, the COVID-19 come as a force majeure. Also, the previous studies that show the education institute, the universities are aware about the importance of e-learning, but because, let's say, the culture change resistance, it was not implemented area. But the current issue is the access and infrastructure of the internet in Iraq. Also, I noticed that in the chat box, one of the colleagues from Yemen mentioned the same issue in Yemen. Also, Iraq are quite better than the situation in Sudan, as I saw now from my colleague from Sudan. I will divide the Iraq into 4 areas regarding the infrastructure. and the current situation. The north of Iraq, KRI, where the infrastructure is very good and the service, it's the teachers move from face-to-face to e-learning smoothly. The center of Iraq, which is the capital, Baghdad, we have the service is average with some issues, especially with synchronized platform. And there's alternatives and solutions offered by the Minister of Education. My colleague Arabia will mention it also. The problem with the liberated cities and rural areas where there's no coverage, limited access, and the poverty. In addition to that, the lack of the electricity, computer, and the IT skills is a major challenge facing the successful implementation of e-learning in developing countries. In fact, this issue are present in Iraq. The unstable political and economical situation that Iraq have been through had a significant impact on infrastructure. Furthermore, that only 12% of total population have personal computers. On the other hand, around 79% of total population using mobile phones, and the previous studies found that mobile learner can be used successfully in education. This means that may be possible that using mobile learning would be more successful than using the e-learning on its own, since the younger generations own more mobile phones than computers. So this could be opportunity for teachers who cannot afford the cost of extra laptops. From the other side, or let's say the future of the e-learning in Iraq, 4G service recently launched in Iraq. It's too late, we know that, but better to come late than not. And this is really important step towards stable and fast internet connectivity, and this will resolve a lot of issues. But still, the cost, it's not affordable for the teachers in liberated cities and rural areas. Also, from my point of view, I think two things will impact or will affect on the e-learning and will support the teachers in the future. Is the Iraqi government has formally adopted a white paper for economic reforms, and this will encourage, let's say, the international companies to invest in Iraq, improving the service and infrastructures. We hope so. The other thing is the National Education Strategic Plan 21 to 2030, which is all established by the Ministry of Education in collaboration with the UNESCO. I think this strategic plan will be unique and different from all previous strategic plans, because the Ministry of Education in Iraq now aware about the importance of moving from the traditional teaching to the using the technology and online learning, and they will take on consideration the teachers in rural areas, how to find solution and alternatives, and they actively working on this to find the right way and the solution for Iraqi teachers and support them. At the end, I would like to thank you all. If you have any question, please just write it in the text box, and I will be more than happy to answer your queries. Thank you.
Ahmed, thank you so much indeed. I think there are three things that come out of that we don't really talk enough about, and one is very practical, and I think two are at a higher level. You know, your last 2 points about investment and you know, clear strategic thinking at the government level, they're so important, aren't they? And that when we come to the end and talk about what we can do as individuals, well, clearly there's a responsibility on governments, on business, to invest in education and to think clearly about the future and how the future is going to involve remote learning. And the practical point that I think it's really, really important that you mentioned, and I think it comes back to, you know, the use of WhatsApp that both Steve and Remus have been talking about this morning. You know, the device that we use, that we can do so much with mobile phones. They're cheaper than laptops, as you were saying. So we need to make sure that in terms of the learning content that's available for teachers and for learners, the kinds of applications that we're using, they're all suited, they're all mobile friendly, so we're not discriminating against teachers who can't access via a laptop and have a mobile only for their learning and for their teaching. And I think the cost of data, which I know in Iraq you are dealing with by helping teachers with the costs of data packages, desperately important. As somebody said in the comments, that, you know, what is the point of talking about good pedagogy, digital literacy skills, if you've got no electricity, if you've got no internet coverage? But even if you have those things, then the cost of data is so high that it's impossible to be online for any significant period. So I think three really important things that come out of that. I don't know, Remes, I'm sorry. Did you want to comment on anything that Ahmed had said then?
Actually, yes. First of all, Ahmed, it's very interesting, all the points that you've mentioned. And I can see the similarity between countries like Iraq and Sudan. And just to add to the point that John was talking about, the access to internet. So I think you did mention a kind of partnership with telecommunication providers, companies, and so on. So my question is, the main internet carrier or telecommunication company in Iraq, is it a governmental company? And if it is a governmental company, is the Ministry of Education trying to get some kind of support for teachers to have a kind of free access to internet, or at least a subsidized internet packages? Because this is something that we did mention, and we did have conversations around this with the Ministry of Education here in Sudan. And we think that if we were able to do something like this, it would be very useful for teachers, because we understand that because of poverty, most of these teachers don't have access to internet.
Thank you very much for your question. The main telecommunication providers are three in Iraq. They are private, not government. But the Ministry of Education, we have the Ministry of Telecommunication. Also, they are providing the internet service. So Ministry of Education did a partnership with the Ministry of Telecommunication to establish a platform, this local platform, intranet, and make it free of charge for the teachers in Iraq. The platform name is Newton. Also, there is a lot other initiative from the local ISB. They have a big network in Iraq, and they upload the materials on the local server. So the people who have access subscribe or internet subscribe, they can access the materials related to the Ministry of Education, and this is called Madrasati, My School. So there is initiatives. In addition to that, the education channel from Ministry of Education, maybe they are planning to use the radio. So there is a lot of solutions, but in the same time, there is a lot of teachers left behind.
And we're going to now. Sorry.
Ahmed. Sorry. That's okay. Thanks a lot, Ahmed.
Welcome, welcome.
One of the comments was about how working in the remote environment is difficult because you can't pick up on visual clues, of course, and we can't see each other here, and it's very difficult to know who would like to say something, of course. We're going to move on to have a second perspective on the situation as regards connectivity in Iraq, and we're very pleased to be able to welcome Arabia Amjad, who's going to talk about Iraq from her perspective, and then we'll be able to take comments and questions at the end, so please keep those coming in. Thank you very much indeed. Next.
Hi everyone. First of all, I'd like to express my gratitude for the whole efforts that are spent for the benefit of the pupils and students at all levels from all. As we are passing through the difficult times with the COVID-19, I'd like to shed the light at the stages that we passed from the beginning. First, when the whole world heard about the pandemic, COVID-19, and the decision, or let's say the sudden decision of the lockdown, the whole world stopped with open mouths as an effect of the shock and astonished what to do. The news they heard, they refusing the news that they heard, of course, in mind. Then, little by little, brains began to observe what was going on. Then the whole world realized that we are facing some problems. Number one problem is education. Number two is work. Number three is health. Let's start, or let's see and discuss the education problem. The biggest difficulty was how to transform curriculum to learners and continue schools, and then reach to the solution of using apps like Zoom, Teams, FaceTime, and so on. So the internet is the number one solution. But using internet made us suffer and face another two problems. Number one, poor access to the internet. Number two, poor families that are without internet access. Families that hardly live on poor income and conditions, and so difficult to offer their children mobile phones or the internet access. In Iraq, government supported students and teachers in two ways. First, established a free-cost platform called Newton on Google and supplied each school with password to log in. The platform works in a highly advanced system, dedicates a space for each headmaster, assistant, student, results, feedback. Teachers here can log in and give their lessons live with their students or pupils. At the same time, can record the lessons in order to be seen later. Teachers can make exams and distribute marks. Parents can see the results and notes of their children. So this also depends on nets. Another solution for the weak nets is that dedicating the Iraqi educational channel for lessons along the day according to a scheduled lessons, supervised and planned so perfectly by supervisors presented by teachers. Each day of the week is dedicated for one level and one topic. For example, on Saturday is English language lessons, on Sunday is for Arabic language lessons, and so on. Even there are lessons for vocational commercial departments. In addition to that, there are explanatory videos to support the learning access. Lessons can be given also live and direct from the to be presented on TV, and can get calls. Teachers can get calls from students, and they answer them. Of course, throughout a number dedicated for this access to be seen at the bottom of the screen. And also recently, teachers even have made Zooms on TV with students. It was a great step, in my opinion. By this way, we are sure that even the simplest family has TV set wherever it is. By this way, the problem of the weak access to the internet is nearly solved because they transform the whole school in their homes. At the end, thank you very much for being with me and listening to me. I hope success for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Arabia. Remus, did you want to provide any comments on that?
Yes. I missed a bit of the presentation, but I'm going to ask my question anyway. So maybe you did cover it. But when speaking about the lessons and the platform used and all of that, and Newton application or website portal, I'm assuming, were teachers trained on using that, and how were they trained?
It's a really good question, and maybe Ahmed could answer that about training that teachers receive for the platforms that Arabia has been referring to.
Thank you, John. Arabia is offline now. I will answer the question. The Ministry of Education was planning for this step for 3 months ago, and they did a workshop for the teachers every week, and they collect the teachers from supervisor from all province, and they train them, and the supervisor go back to their province and train other teachers. It's like a tree training. And through that, they start implementing the Newton. So the process takes around 3 months.
This is very impressive, honestly. Having a cascaded training while developing the portal, all of that. I am very much impressed by the Iraqi government. Thanks a lot, Arabia and Ahmed. John, would you like to add anything?
No, I think it's there's a lot of comments coming in. I think around the inspiration that people draw from individual teachers, but also individual teachers who are working in difficult conditions in Iraq and Sudan. I think it's really interesting, this whole thing about combinations, about hybridity, about different channels, about how we can help teachers to get the most out of print, the most out of radio, the most out of TV, the most out of the internet, bring all of those things together to give learners the kind of engaging and motivating experience that they deserve. I think it's all really interesting, and I think as we turn our attention now to the Yemen, and we're very fortunate to have with us our colleague from the Yemen, Raja Bazara, we can explore some of those themes further in relation to the Yemen. So there we have a picture of the war-damaged school on the front line in Yemen, rather like the picture we saw of Sudan. Tells a very stark story about conditions in the Yemen. So Raja, thank you very much indeed for being with us today. Over to you.
Thank you so much, John. It's really my pleasure to take part in this symposium today, and my colleague Mohammed. And as you said, I mean, Yemen is not much different from Sudan or Iraq. They are quite similar, actually, but there might be a slight difference, is that Yemen is going under a conflict and war. Actually, as you all may know, that Yemen is entering now the 5th year of war and conflict, and this actually has a devastating impact on the country's already fragile education system. Many schools actually has been damaged, and it's worth noting that only 1 of 5 schools can no longer be used as schools, because in most of the occasions are used by military camps. On other occasions, they are used as shelter for internally displaced people. And this actually has caused a lot of issues around the education system and school performance. Teachers, actually, the war has impacted almost every single person in Yemen. But honestly speaking, teachers are the most who have been impacted by this war. Many teachers has to abandon their teaching profession and resort to other jobs to generate income and look for other sources. It's worth also noting that teachers haven't received salaries since 2015, which really caused a big of dilemma to the teachers. Those teachers who decided to stay and remain in the teaching professions and continue teaching, actually they teach in a very harsh circumstances. Not different than other countries of Iraq and Sudan. There is no adequate basic teaching facilities, no power, electricity, even the most basic resources like textbook and teaching aid. And on top of all these, also, they have sometimes extremely limited connectivity and in so many occasions, no connectivity at all. And also, what makes even more challenging is that schools even lack proper sanitary facilities and sometimes water and adequate COVID-19 hygiene resources. This fact discourage a lot of students, especially girls, to join the schools. This has resulted into a high rate of drop rates, especially among the girls. Due to the war and due to the ongoing conflict and the damage of schools, a lot of psychological issues has arisen among students, and teachers need to cope with this situation. In many occasions, teachers need to play two roles, the role of a teacher, also a role of a social worker and a psychologist, because most of the schools in Yemen have no social workers. This actually has added another challenge and another burden to the already burdened shoulder of the teachers. I mean, this photo, it's a self-explanatory, as John has described. This has taken in Taiz. Taiz is one of the most populous cities in Yemen, and it is greatly affected by the war. It's one of the conflict-affected cities. Almost every single school has been affected, and many schools has been completely damaged. So this is, I mean, a typical classroom. It's a damaged school, no windows, no walls, only a teacher and a whiteboard. And this is the only resources they have to sustain and continue the learning education. British Council actually, in this context, has decided to support and sustain the education. I mean, British Council has a long track record supporting teacher development in Yemen since 2010, and this is through two major programs: English for Education System, and this is specifically for English teachers in schools, and another program which is Connecting Classroom, which is aimed to teachers of other disciplines, sometimes math, science, and so on. And in 2020, and in response to COVID-19 pandemic, like many other countries, decided to completely shift our programs to be delivered remotely and virtually where possible. And sometimes we resort to synchronous methods, sometimes, and it's very limited actually, due to the fact that there is no excellent connectivity in Yemen, and sometimes asynchronous teaching, which is like other digital platforms like Facebook and WhatsApp, and sometimes we combine them both at the same time. The British Council has a lot of approaches, like the LTPN, which is the English Language Teaching Professional Network. We started last year actually to revive this approach and enlarge the network. We have reached around 2,000 English language teachers across Yemen, and through this wider network, they engage in a different professional practices, participate in online courses, and so on. Also, through our community of practices, we have 3 very proactive and active community of practices. And they are motivated and they have strong social skills, and through them actually we utilize and we manipulate this methods to reach as much teacher as possible. They deliver online sessions sometimes. They organize follow-up activities around British Council free-to-use resources. British Council also assisted teachers with internet data to support them maintain the learning. Also through systematic and benefit a wide range of online courses. Our future plan, actually, since now we are maintaining this digital learning and digital platforms, we have seen that the Teaching for Success approach and model is a very good program for Yemen. We did a scoping analysis to teachers, and we have identified the gaps that they need support in. And through this scoping analysis, we have came to know that there is a gap, and especially in students' assessment and lesson planning and classroom management, especially that Yemen has a very large classroom. Sometimes in one classroom, we have over like 80 students. So this is an area where teachers needs to be developed. Also, how to integrate ICT in the classroom and how to manage resources. This is our future plan, especially that we have seen that the Teaching for Success was a quite successful model actually in similar countries of Yemen, like Syria context. Also, maybe I think Iraq context. So that's why we're planning to continue. Actually, I have my colleague Mohammed Al-Khayyat, who is actually a community of practice leader, and he will talk further about the challenges as a teacher, as a trainer, who how to cope the day-to-day teaching practices. He, by the way, Mohammed came from Taiz. This is the city who has been heavily influenced by the war and the conflict. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Raja. Raymaz, would you like to?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Raja. And may Allah bless the beautiful country of Yemen, and may peace be upon you soon. Firstly, I admire all the things that you guys have been doing, and I think it's amazing that despite of everything, education is still a priority, and people are trying so hard to reach these teachers and for teachers to reach students. And I can see from the picture that it's devastating, the situation, how the situation is. I have a couple of questions and comments about some of the things that you've mentioned, but something that was very interesting to me was when you said that teachers are no longer just teachers, they're actually social workers. So around that, has there been any kind of training or initiative to see how can we support teachers to own that? Because it's obviously a role that has been forced on them, but how can we support teachers to own that role through maybe child protection trainings, I don't know, actually, like social worker kind of role. Yeah. So was there any kind of training that happened around that?
Thank you so much, Rimas, for this question. Actually, it's very good. I think there is no direct professional development for teachers in this area specifically. But what we do, I think British Council website has a lot of resources about mental health and how to support teachers and students with resources in those areas. For me, as a British Council, as a projects manager at the British Council, also I am the safeguarding focal point. It's my job to disseminate those resources to teachers. It's very limited approach and very modest, but actually it's quite effective that we deliver those resources and try to help teachers to maintain the mental health in the schools.
Fantastic, fantastic. This is very good that you guys are doing that. What can I say?
Also,
it's just teachers are heroes.
Sorry. Also, yeah, I just want to add also, sorry to interrupt you, Rimaz, is that there are other international NGOs in Yemen, like the GIZ and the Save the Children, who actually support the ministry and the teachers in this regard. They develop and they deliver a tailored training program specifically on how to maintain the psychological support across schools in Yemen.
Fantastic. That's very good. Well, John, I think we can move to the next presenter, but I would say that honestly, I find it very impressive that teachers who weren't paid since 2015 are still continuing to teach and in those circumstances.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, isn't it? And I think that you know, quite a lot of the comments that have come in have expressed great solidarity and some comparative comments about the Lebanon and about Algeria, but a lot of solidarity across the region on that. And the points about girls and why do girls seem to bear the brunt of the kinds of problems, and what's the role of the local community in terms of their support for teachers and education in general. But yes, as you say, let's now move on to Mohammed and get his perspective on the situation in the Yemen. Thanks, Mohammed.
Thanks, Raga. Hello, everyone. This is Mohammed Al Khayyat, and I'm going to talk about the challenges that face online training in Yemen, and also to shed the light on the solutions we have adopted to get over them. In fact, the biggest challenge is that most of the infrastructure of network sector in Yemen has been destroyed during the war, and its performance was greatly affected, and this resulted in a low interconnection with an average of 0.38 megabytes per second. This was reflected negatively on our training endeavors and made our work in TOPs a kind of impossible. Especially, we were planning to conduct lots of synchronous sessions. The second barrier is related to teachers' financial conditions, which has a profound effect on their internet access. The reason is that nearly 2/3 of public school teachers in 11 governorates haven't received their salaries for over 3 years, and consequently can't afford the cost of the internet service to join online training programs. And what makes the situation worse is the recent increase in the cost of the service, which exceeds 50% of one's income. The diagram here shows that Yemen is ranked as the second country out of 19 countries in the Arab region with the highest internet cost. Another challenge we face is that the shift to online training has led to inequality and equity in accessing training programs between teachers who live in urban areas with fast connection and those who live in rural areas with weak connection. In addition, cultural and conservative traditions are barriers for female teachers who are willing to join such online training programs. The fourth barrier is that most Yemeni teachers have no digital literacy, and this constitutes a huge challenge for most of them to join online training programs. We have worked with teachers who can't even create an email account for themselves. Some spend too much time training to enroll in online courses, but in vain. They have many digital difficulties, in fact. The fourth barrier is the political conflict, which led to the existence of two different educational systems in Yemen, North and South. However, both systems are not placing online learning or training in their respective regions and policies. And this poses a challenge to mount a kind of harmonized countrywide response towards teachers' online training. And now I'll talk about strategies we applied in Yemen to overcome teacher training challenges. Our strategy, for example, to face lack of device tools, such as laptops, was to drive our COP teachers to use their smartphones, since mobile data coverage is much better than broadband. As well as 99% of all Yemeni teachers have smartphones, as part of their daily routines. And to overcome weak connection, we actually applied two strategies. The first was to select appropriate platforms, and after a careful evaluation of the available platforms, we decided to use WhatsApp for the 3 COPs and Facebook for our tags group. In fact, these two platforms are widely used by Yemeni teachers. Besides, they don't need fast internet. And more importantly, they can be applied synchronously and asynchronously. We also applied the solution of allocating suitable time to connect, just to avoid the rush internet connection hours. So we agreed with our COB members to connect together at specific times when there is low pressure on the internet service. This works well, and we could connect and conduct several successful synchronous sessions. The fourth strategy was discussing the financial conditions Yemeni teachers are passing through and suggested a kind of support from the British Council. They responded positively and supported the proactive members with mobile data credit and several online training courses. And finally, in order not to leave any teacher behind, we are thinking of using flash memories as an alternative to disseminate training materials to local teachers who have no internet connection at all. This requires visits to public schools, which are located in remote areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. Remus, did you want to come back on anything that Mohammed had just said?
Yeah, just saying it's magnificent, all the things that they've done. I was very impressed by the idea of SIM cards. It's not SIM cards, it's storage. I don't know what you call it, but like these memory cards.
Yeah, offline learning.
Yeah, memory cards. We did explore that idea in Sudan, but they're quite expensive. So for us to get all teachers memory cards, or most of the remote teachers, were a bit expensive. But I'm happy that that would work for you, Mohammed, in Yemen. And honestly, very impressed with all the initiatives that you guys are doing, and I can see how you're tackling each issue as it goes. So it's not just a one unified solution or one unified action. So it's as we all did, it's a bit of here and there and a bit of this and that. So I think this is the only way to tackle this. Thanks a lot, Mohammed.
Just before you sum up, Remus, if I can, I think you've just kind of hit the nail on the head there. I think with what kind of joins everything together that we're doing about this, the hybridity.
Yeah.
I think that's really the key to the future. I think really to look at how all of these different things that we can do, whether it's using smartphones or memory cards or paying for data packages or using a mobile phone rather than a laptop, integrating broadcast, print, TV, radio. There's been lots of questions coming in there. I think that's it for me anyway. That's what sticks out from what we've heard in the first two sessions this morning, is how do we bring all of these different contributing elements together to make a whole that's going to make sense for learners and for teachers.
Yeah.
Sorry, just a personal reflection on that.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. And this is what I was thinking actually during these two sessions, is that how they're all coming together when we mention the word hybridity. So how do we tailor each response based on the situation itself and the country? We can see that it's very similar. The issues are very similar between these countries, although they're different countries, different regions, at least for Sudan, and but they are still facing the same issues. But when we sum up all the things that we can do and look at how can we not leave any teacher behind. A lot of factors I think come to mind when I say that sentence, is that it's a lot of small components together. Is that how we understand the situation in each country and how these teachers are operating, but also understanding that these teachers are not only teachers, they are actually fathers, their sons, their daughters, their mothers, they have families. So teachers who are in remote areas are being deployed from I would say, at least in Sudan, from Khartoum to other regions to support, but they are facing a lot of issues with connectivity, with accommodation, with motivation. Teachers are not getting paid. There's a lot of issues around a lot of other things, but how can we support that? So I would say, to conclude all of that, I would say that at least from my perspective, and I would gladly want to hear from the other panelists, is that we focus on offline access. How can we support these teachers through offline access initiatives like the memory card initiative, like hard copies, self-access materials that can be sent to teachers in their own communities, community-based teacher networks, teachers supporting each other, understanding their challenges, understanding the situation they're in, but also understanding the situation for the students themselves. And I think Mohammed just mentioned something about female teachers not being to get online for some reason. I didn't get that, but I think maybe he can come back to explain this to us. But so there's a lot of issues around accessibility, but also around equality of access and equity, of course. And we treating all teachers, are all teachers the same? Are all teachers getting the same support from all these regions, in all these regions, from the same government or the same organizations or whatever? So for me, when we say we call for action, this is what I think is that we focus on offline access rather than online access, to be able to bring everyone together, not just people who have access to internet or smartphones, devices, electricity, power, all of that, but also teachers who are teaching in very remote areas with absolutely not just maybe a blackboard or a whiteboard. So just to hear back from everyone else, what do you think our solutions and our actions should be, and what do you guys propose?
Adnan or Raja, do you have any closing comments? Sorry.
Yes, I agree with Rimaz about the focusing on the offline, because there's no solution for the people in cities where they no infrastructure or access. So we could support them from the alternatives as the offline. And also I like the idea of sharing the memory cards. I also proposed this idea before to colleague in region, and we might be able to implement it in the future, like collect a resource from our resources from our network or materials that we think it will help and support these teachers, and copy it in flash memories and send it to the Ministry of Education, and they will disseminate it to the rural areas. This is option one. Option two, that we already provide data cards for a few teachers in Iraq. The British Council sponsor it. This is a temporary solution, but it's effective, and maybe encourage the government to do the same. Thank you all.
Thanks, Ahmed. Mohammed, Raja, do you guys want to?
Yes. Yeah, just one last comment, Rimaz, is that I do agree with you, of course, that we need to pay more attention to the rural and remote areas. I mean, here in Yemen, worth mentioning that the majority of teachers, probably 70%, are in the rural areas. So we need to pay more attention as much as we pay attention to the teachers in the cities and the urban areas, we also need to give attention to those teachers, because they work hard. Actually, they strive in a hard circumstances, and we need to support them. Yes, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Raja, and I totally agree, of course.
Great, thank you so much indeed. I'd like to thank Ramaz, Raja, Mohammed, Ahmed and Arabia for that really not just interesting but inspirational view of what's happening in the Sudan and Yemen and Iraq, and there's lessons in there for all of us. And I think, and in relation to a comment that came in about is the pandemic, the effect of the pandemic exacerbating inequality, that it's actually increasing the number of teachers who are left behind. There can be no doubt that all of the research suggests that that is the case, and that we need to take action. And these are not just empty words. We've looked at some practical examples. We need to take action, I think, as organizations, but also as individuals, and that personal responsibility, our personal accountability to help our colleagues to make sure that nobody is left behind. So thank you very much. I'm glad to hand over to Helen now, because we have the results of the poll that we left you with in relation to the panel discussion. Hala, are you with us? Are you there?
Yes, I'm here finally. Alhamdulillah. Hi, John, and hi, everyone. And I'm really excited to be here on as part of this event. I'd like to thank our colleagues from Iraq and Yemen for this particular inspirational session. Lots of inspiring stories, and it's that you're setting, guys, an example of resilience and perseverance. So well done, and you've got all of our respect and appreciation for the tremendous efforts you've been doing for a while. I'd like also to thank our audience for their great interaction today. Since the early morning, we've got more than 130 people interacting on the symposium wall. Thank you very much for that. And for the poll we've posted for this particular session, and the question was about thinking about a future that has more effective remote learning. And our question for you was, which of the following barriers is the biggest? And so far, up to this moment, 99 participants have taken the poll, and they actually are still taking the poll now. So thank you very much. No, it's 100 participants now. Thank you very much for that. And according to 35% of the audience who respond to the poll, think that the biggest barrier is the lack of access to the internet. And I think this falls on the same wavelength of what Ahmed, Raja, Mohammed, and the other colleagues from Iraq and Yemen and Sudan were talking about. So it's number one barrier is lack of access to the internet. 29% of the respondents agreed that negative attitudes towards online learning is barrier number two. I think that links also to something mentioned in Steve's report this morning. 20% of the respondents said that poor digital literacy skills is the biggest barrier. 11% refer to limited online pedagogical skills as the biggest barrier. And finally, 6% mentioned or agreed that lack of good remote learning content could be the biggest barrier. Thank you very much, and stay tuned. I'm very happy to be with you every now and then during the symposium to update you with the latest of our polls today. Thank you very much. Over to you, John.
Great, that's very interesting then. So access, negative views, poor digital literacy skills, pedagogical skills, and remote learning content. Okay, food for thought on that. Thank you very much to those 100 people that have completed the poll for us. Okay, we're now ready to move on to session number 3. So if we could have the next slide, please. Okay, so this session, it's going to be an update on the Teacher Networking Initiative. We've got a video for you to play to start with, and I'm going to hand over now to Nora Zaba, great dear friend, dear colleague from Bahrain, who's going to take us through this session. So thanks very much, Nora, and we can listen to the video.
Thank you, John.
The Teacher Networking Initiative, TNI, a professional development program for English language teachers in the Middle East and North Africa region. So, if you're interested in developing as a teacher, watch this video and find out more about how the Teacher Networking Initiative can help you. The program is built around a webinar series called Ask Hala. There are 8 webinars in the first series, covering the following topics. As well as providing selected input on remote teaching understanding and skills, the series is also designed to orientate you towards the range of British Council resources, hosted on our global Teaching English website. Alongside the Ask Hala webinar series, learning is supported through communities of practice, COPs, small groups of teachers who are learning together. Support for the development of COPs is provided in 2 ways. Firstly, a training course for COP leaders to help them set up and sustain COPs. There are 8 topics in the first phase of the COP Leader Support Program. And secondly, through providing learning content to be used during COP sessions. This content is a collection of learning resources called Professional Practice Pathways. There are 5 professional practice pathways used in the first phase of the TNI. The professional practice pathways are informed by the British Council's Continuing Professional Development Framework for Teachers. The TNI program also includes large online events, bringing together the network of teachers from across the MENA region to share experiences of remote delivery and collaborative learning. In the first phase of the TNI, there were 2 large online events. So, this is the Teacher Networking Initiative, the Ask Hala webinar series, the COP Leader Support Program, the Professional Practice Pathways, the large online events. Peer-to-peer collaboration as an element of school-based continuing professional development can be an effective platform for professional development, allowing teachers to share, practice, focus on learning content relevant to their teaching context, and learn in an open and supportive environment. We hope you enjoyed the video. Please explore the resources available through the Teacher Networking Initiative. There's never been a better time to learn online and take your teaching to the next level. And the British Council is committed to supporting you on your journey and promoting quality English language education in the Middle East and North Africa region.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. This is Nora Sabah, Head of Projects and Programs from British Council, Bahrain. Thank you, John, and thank you to all the speakers of session 2. So one of the solutions that Remaz talked about is teachers networking. And this initiative was launched by the British Council as a response to COVID-19 in 2020. In this session, we will hear from COP leaders about the impact of being part of the COP communities of practice in MENA. With us here, one of the leaders who is representing all the leaders in MENA. She will take us through the initiative, the impact of it on her and the leaders. Then we will listen to a number of leaders talking about their own reflection about joining the communities of practice in their countries. So over to you, Asil Al-Masri from University or Muscat College, Oman. Please, Asil.
Thank you very much, Noura. Thank you, John, and everyone who's with us today. So before we start, I just want to thank everyone who was presenting in session 2. It was a very inspiring stories that we have heard. You are indeed heroes to us. It shows that teachers can conquer anything and they will always stand strong no matter what. So I would like you to take you in a journey of how it started 2020. So kindly fasten your seatbelts because as you remember, it was a bumpy ride we had. So the story started when COVID happened. We went through pandemic and of course, all of a sudden we had to switch to online, and it was a very difficult situation because we did not have any previous training or knowledge of how can we teach remotely. So it was a very difficult moment. We felt like we were on a plane and suddenly the plane has fallen and we are left in a deserted island and we don't know what to do. But thankfully, rescue came. And that's when the Ask Hala webinars started in July, where a number of series been done and different topics have been discussed. So it started from making the shift to remote teaching, using WhatsApp, Facebook in teaching asynchronous platforms, blended learning, motivating learners, selecting and designing materials, supporting parents as well through the pandemic, because it's not only been a difficult situation for the teachers, but as well for parents because they have to use technology in education. They have to support their children. They have to be aware of the platforms that we are using as well. And of course, assessing learners. So the support that we have received from the British Council has indeed been very beneficial. We have learned so many things, techniques that we can use to ensure that our classrooms are active, engaging our students, using different platforms as well and mixing them both so that we can achieve our targets. And the most important problem that I think is motivation, and which it was highlighted in Ask Hala webinars, because it has been a very difficult problem. And until now, I know that some of us are still facing, and motivation is not just only for learners as well as for teachers. So this was our rescue and the support that we have received from the British Council as part of the Teacher Network Initiative that we have done. And I would like to move to the next slide where we get to hear from one of the teachers, COP leaders from Bahrain, Dr. Nisha, where she's going to give us her feedback about the professional workshops.
British Council professional development workshops have always been welcomed by the teaching fraternity across all levels, especially from schools, simply because school teachers world over outnumber the faculty at higher education and university level. Furthermore, the needs of school teachers are more crucial compared to their counterparts at college and university level, since school teaching lays that initial foundation for all learning. Being part of the COP has been a great learning experience for me in terms of developing a community of practice, to reach out, lead, support, and even to generate a wealth of problem-solving ideas related to remote teaching. My suggestions and ideas are primarily based on my observations of my teaching practice students as I see them struggle and strive to accomplish successfully their remote teaching. My suggestions and ideas will benefit not only our context, but of most schools globally, with the exception of those which still lack infrastructure for remote teaching. I have 4 suggestions to make. Number 1, teachers need online disciplining skills. These should enable teachers to prepare their students in handling their camera, microphone, and turn taking, along with online etiquettes at the start and end of the class. Teachers would also need skills on desktop settings, classroom rules, and online reward options. Number 2, teachers need online time management skills, which would determine for them the amount of time for a starter activity, to decide the number of activities to engage in achieving the learning objectives, and manageable homework options. Number 3, online differentiated instruction, which will prepare teachers to have a mixed bag of online tasks to meet the needs of slow, average, and high achievers. And number 4, teachers need ideas to develop support teams. I would like to propose a model here. They could be offered a choice of 2 teams. Team A, of like-minded and very focused, skill or problem-based, and Team B, which could be of mixed skills, where each one shares and learns from one another. When I asked my COP Bahrain mentees, Fatima Al-Rafia and Dana Al-Sheikh, on their suggestions and ideas for teachers in their context, both of them had the focus on pedagogy. According to them, teachers in their context needed how to implement teaching strategies in online context. Thus, to conclude, I would say classroom routines, time management, differentiated instruction, and pedagogy of remote learning. This is what the teachers in current context definitely need to be skilled in. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Nisha Mike from Bahrain, for your input and your feedback. And because we continue to listen, the British Council continue to listen to the teachers and what they need to help them and to support them, there will be another Ask Hala cycle webinars, again, cycle number 2. And if you have seen it in your PDF, when you have received the invitation, there is a poll where you get to choose the topics that you would like to hear from or to hear about or to be discussed in the Ask Hala webinars cycle 2. And as I mentioned earlier, it has indeed benefited us all. It was extremely beneficial and we have learned a lot and we will continue to learn. So this was the first stop of our journey. And now we're going to move on to the second stop, where we started with the COP Leader Program. So the community of practice started in September, where we were contacted by the British Council from different parts of the world, like MENA regions, where they wanted a teacher to be the leader of the COP. And we were provided with training every month. And we have discussed several topics, such as the key features of successful community of practice, learning content orientation, reaching out to teachers, key facilitation skills, selecting professional development content, encouraging application of learning, encouraging engagement, and of course, encouraging reflection. And I would like to speak on behalf of all the leaders that the series that we have done and the training that we have done, it was extremely beneficial. We have learned a lot. They were informative. We packed so many information and we were able to transfer all these information that we have learned to the other teachers from our COP group. And the feedback that we have received were extremely good, and it shows that we are together and we hear each other and we will continue to support each other. And hearing stories from other COP leaders in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Palestine, and all parts of the world, Sudan and everywhere, is very inspiring, because in time of crisis, that's when we all come to stand together and support each other. And now we're going to hear from 3 COP leaders Nada from Oman, Shahir from Yemen, and Talib from Iraq about their experience and feedback of the COP program.
Hello everybody, I'm Nada Al-Habsi. I am from Oman. I am so pleased to share with you my experience in the COP. Being a leader was an ambition for me, even though COVID-19 has negative impacts all around the world. It gives me a chance to be a leader, a real leader. Actually, my experience was furnished with flowers. My work as a trainer was linked with my institution. They were looking for a trainer to train teachers in schools to cope with the technological change in education. Each school gives me a name of one leader. So my group was already set up by the Ministry of Education. They were 23 teachers from different Cycle 1 schools. I had established 3 channels of communication, which are WhatsApp for inquiries and members' notes, a classroom in Google as a formal platform for the group, and Google Meet for a live meeting. Attending webinars created by British Council helped me to behave as a facilitator more than a trainer, taught me the meaning of cooperation with others, raised my self-confidence, widens my horizon to discover new applications, and managing sessions in an allocated time. I think I am lucky to be a part of COP or community of practice. I am just 6-year experienced teacher and I have learned a lot. Besides, I became a certified trainer in the Ministry of Education in Oman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nada Al-Habsi from Oman. And next we're going to hear from Mr. Shahir from Yemen.
Hello everyone, this is Shahir Al-Burayhi from Yemen. It's a privilege to talk about my experience with training in this symposium. I would like to extend my thanks to the organizers for this wonderful event in which we, leaders of communities of practice, exchange ideas and reflect on our experiences for a complete year. As a COP leader, I have trained with Mariam from Bahrain and Dunya from Lebanon. It has been an enriching experience so far, and I hope it will continue. At the beginning of our podium, we created a WhatsApp group to ease communication and accessibility. We introduced ourselves to each other and got to know about each other's countries. We talked about our career paths and the different roles and posts we held to find common interest. I have worked as an EFL teacher, instructor, lecturer, head of English department at a private institute and teacher trainer. I have a BA in English education, an MA in linguistics, and I'm currently doing PhD in ELT. Dunya has a BA in teaching English in elementary classes, an MA in educational leadership, and now she is the head of monitoring and evaluation unit for 13 schools in Lebanon. Mariam Al-Hamad has been working as a teacher for primary, middle, and high school. She has worked as an academic advisor, career counselor, quality consultant, life skills trainer, and translator. She has over 29 years of experience. She believes that teachers are the most capable people of changing the world because they embrace souls, feelings, and thoughts. And I really agree with her. Then we agreed on holding synchronous sessions to learn from each other, and we selected Zoom application for this purpose. We have had 2 fruitful meetings through Zoom application. In the first meeting, we agreed on the main points which we will be discussing in our upcoming sessions. We talked about the weather, tourism, and our different timing, as I'm currently in India and they are in their countries. We exchanged our action plans and materials, reflected on our COP groups, and talked about what went well and what didn't go well. In the second meeting, Mariam prepared a presentation using Canva and talked about her experience so far. She talked about her current post and her responsibilities. She also talked about the context she is working in. Mariam also shared an amazing previous training PPTs through OneDrive. She also joined one of our WhatsApp groups that contains around 250 teachers in Yemen, in which we share materials, webinars, and conferences links and provide support to teachers. Dunia shared her experience regarding her monitoring of the schools, the meetings they hold, and the challenges they face there in Lebanon. Along with COP leaders from Yemen, I have started an initiative of creating a digital library for Yemeni EFL teachers through Google Drive, using a new feature called Shared Drive. I have added Muhammad, Khalid, Dunia, Marian, proactive and committed members of our COP groups in Yemen as contributors and content managers to add files to the drive. Most of the contributors have started adding books and materials to the digital library. I have also introduced the feature of Make Available Offline to help teachers read while offline to solve connectivity issues and mobile storage problems. We, the COP leaders from Yemen, are planning to start a reading club for EFL teachers shortly. This is an initiative that was suggested by my COP member and friend Abdulaziz Saif. The idea behind this reading club is that we will be selecting a book to read and then have a discussion about the book on a weekly or monthly basis. If anyone is interested to join the reading club, please let me know. Finally, I would like to say a big thank you to the British Council for organizing this symposium and for giving me the opportunity to take part in this wonderful event. My thanks also go to Noura and Asil for their guidance. Special thanks go to the British Council Yemen. My heartfelt thanks also go to Mariam and Dunia for their time and effort.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shahir. And now we're going to listen to Mr. Talib from Iraq.
I'm very happy to have the opportunity to talk about the impact I have had by the training in the domain of community of practice. It is well said that with the help of a friend you can reach the stars. Accordingly, it has been so interesting and beneficial to take part in the various enriching sessions delivered by the British Council in the Culture of Community of Practice concept. My knowledge has been increased in using the different platforms in training and teaching, for example, Edmodo, Padlet, Facebook groups, WordWall, and WhatsApp, in addition to developing the effective strategies for locating the appropriate digital content, following guidelines for taming tools and platforms for achieving the desired learning outcomes. I enhanced the ability to use these kinds of communication means with other teachers through sessions demonstrating many details in this context. I highly benefited from the webinars and the professional practice pathways that were presented during this learning journey. I realized the significance of certain skills, among which are the communication and collaboration skills in achieving continuous professional development and in dealing with different challenges we face in our educational system. Most significantly, I have been working hard to share the experience with other educators. As a matter of fact, the learning is tremendous, and I'm applying and sharing what I'm learning with teachers, my colleagues, and even my students.
Thank you very much, Mr. Talib from Iraq. And as you have heard from other stories from leaders from Oman, Yemen, and Iraq, that we continue to support teachers, and as John said, that the goal or the main aim is to ensure that there are no teachers left behind. And that's why when leaders were buddying with other leaders, we were trying to achieve that goal. We were trying to ensure that all teachers are engaged, we are all communicating together, and we're all trying to ensure that we are never leaving anyone behind.
Thank
So,
you,
Rachel,
Asil.
thank you very much. No worries.
Thank you, Asil. Sorry to interrupt you. And I'd like to thank Taleb, Dr. Nisha, Shahar, and Nada for their sharing their reflection about being leaders in the COP, MENA COPs. And buddying is important. If you can see, there is a positive side of COVID-19 that we have now teachers from all MENA region buddying together, twinning together, working together, using very simple means of communication. That's WhatsApp. Asil, would you like to say anything about that?
Yes, I just want to say that the journey is never ending. There's always gonna be growth, improvement, adversity. You just gotta take it all and do what is right. Continue to grow, continue to live in the moment. And that's exactly what we're hoping to continue have with the Ask Hala webinar cycle 2. And the COP leader program will also going to continue. The leaders will always continue to support other teachers, buddying with other leaders, twinning with them, and we will never leave any teachers behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Asil. And now over to John or Hala to show the results.
Yeah,
John,
I'll just,
Nora. Yeah,
I'll just nip in there if I may. Thank you so much indeed. I mean, it has been a long journey so far, and we've been very happy to go through that journey with some of the people that you've just heard from, that Asil brought together. Thank you so much indeed for that. And what we'd like to do now is to talk about the future. And we've asked you some questions about the future, and Hala, as always, has your answers.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Asil, and thanks, Noura. I'm really proud to hear familiar voices and see familiar faces from our first generation of communities of practice leaders. And it was really useful for me, and I think for the team as well at the British Council, to listen to all of your reflections and all of your feedback following the first cycle of our first community of practice leader cohort. It's been a learning journey, not only for me, but it's also, I mean, whether for through the Ask Hala webinar series or the Community of Practice Leader program, it's been a learning journey, definitely for myself and for the team at the British Council. It wasn't you only who benefited from this experience, but it was us as well. We've posted a poll to ask you to pick your top 7 from a list of choices for the next Ask Hala webinar series, cycle 2. And so far, 129 participants have responded to the poll. So thank you very much for that. And the first 3, like the top 3 choices from your side, guys, was number 1, techniques to help your learners catch up. And by this one, we mean classroom techniques and classroom practice to help you help the learners compensate for the learning they lost during the school disruption. The second choice comes for helping learners who can't get online. Again, this comes in harmony with everything we've been saying today. The lack of internet accessibility and how can we take care of those who cannot have internet access. The third top choice was how to teach communicatively, but also still teach to the exam. That's an interesting one, and the rest of the responses are almost equal for the rest of the choices, and we'll have deep thinking about prioritizing these choices for the next Ask Hala webinar series. As for the next, like the open-ended question as part of this poll, it was about suggesting a topic of your choice, and it's like 102 suggestions, and more are still coming in. So you're suggesting teaching for kindergarten students. You're suggesting changing the mindset of teachers who refuse to introduce technology into their classroom. Requests again around evaluation and assessment online. That's an important one. Handling challenging behavior problems in the classroom. Thank you very much for that one. And how to provide feedback to learners whose achievement is way below level without causing embarrassment. Such an interesting thought. Something around individual differences, something about online teaching in higher education context. That's amazing. Something around transdisciplinary learning and learning about and through language balance. Wow, that's a good one. And more requests around motivating learners, effective English for specific purposes, teaching, and lots more. Actually, they are still coming in. So thank you very much for responding to the poll, and we'll have some important homework to do today following this symposium, is to think deeply about your suggestions and prioritizing the topics for our next, for our future work, inshallah, across the region. Thanks very much for that. John, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I was just going to say some really interesting suggestions. I think homework is right there. I think you've given us a lot to think about there. I think the feedback to students who are not meeting expectations, I think, is a really interesting one. It's very interesting, also reassuring, I think, that we're kind of thinking along the same lines, in the sense that the help and support for how to approach catching up on lost learning came out as number one. I think that's very interesting and very reassuring, as I say. And I think the big thing, and I think we need just to, you know, to maybe have this as a kind of a constant theme. It's just this word motivation. That whether it's motivating learners who've got you know, challenging behavior, whether it's motivating teachers who you know, are not willing to look at ways of integrating technology into the classroom. I think that's got to be a key thing that we really look at. How do we change that mindset? People have been using the word change, well, the expression changing mindsets a lot this morning, and I think that's something that we need to have as a constant theme. When is our homework due, would you say, Hala, that we'll be ready with dates and a list for after Ramadan? Do you think that's reasonable?
Yeah, I think it's quite reasonable and quite practical to give teachers kind of jolly time and break during the holy month of Ramadan, so they can have their prayers properly. Then right after Ramadan, we can come back to you guys with our fresh plans for two things: the next generation of this community of practice leader program and the Ask Hala webinar series. And I'm amazed of the amount of feedback it keeps coming, it's flowing, it's scrolling down, and lots of interesting things are coming through. So we've got a lot of things to think about, really. So thanks very much for being so enthusiastic and so committed to the initiative.
Yeah, and those who are interested in joining communities of practice in their countries or the Teachers Network, please contact the British Council in your country. And I've just published or announced the email address. If you have any question, any inquiry, please write to us. Thank you.
And also, if it's a good time, John, to break the good news that the community of practice leader program is being transformed digitally these days and will be pushed online perhaps next month.
Well, as we say in the video, there has never been a better time Yes, that's a very good time to talk in a bit more detail, I think, about the COP
region.
I'm sorry, Hala. Please go ahead.
Yeah, we've been transforming. It's not okay. We've been transforming the community of practice. We've been transforming the community of practice leader program into a digital course, and it will be hosted by the British Council platform. The first release of the course was actually delivered synchronously through live sessions on Microsoft Teams, and you've met there. We thought it might be used for access. It will be e-moderated through our pool of e-moderators. And it's going to be for free, open for all teacher educators across the MENA region. So stay tuned and watch this space for more news. And I just want to comment on the community of practice leader program and the buddying system Noura and Asir and the other colleagues have been talking about. It's really amazing, and it's really inspiring to see teachers and teacher educators from Yemen talking to teachers from Iraq, to teachers from Palestine, to teachers from Bahrain, and so on. Do you know what we're having here, guys? We're having educators without borders. Truly, really, and I'm so proud of this. Thank you very much, and back to you, John.
Great, thank you. Tema, could we go back to the slide with the program on, please?
While Tamar prepare this, please, I would like to remind participants to do the 2 surveys to get your certificate. And you will get the certificate in 2 weeks, not immediately. Please remember that. Thank you.
Okay then, and maybe you were right. Just if you go back one, Tema, to the just before the program, our questions. That's it. That's it. So as we come to a close, just like to bring us back to the beginning, our starting point here, to really see how far we've got. We've spent 3 hours, 3 very enjoyable, inspirational hours together this morning. So we talked to Steve at the beginning about his recent research report about the effectiveness of remote learning for teachers to help them develop professionally. And that, I think, is a key thing in that in our rush to online delivery, we haven't stopped asking the very, very obvious question, is it effective? Does it work? Are teachers actually learning when they're involved in synchronous and asynchronous professional development that is not face-to-face? You know, and that's a question that in Steve's research that's looked across the region at 4 different programs, and has come up with some of the key insights that he spoke about in his interview this morning. And they're all in his report, and his report will be out at the end of this month, at the end of April. And it's key reading, it's essential reading. If you have any interest at all in professional development, 1, and 2, if you have any interest at all in professional development as it's delivered remotely, this will be key reading. Key reading, not just to understand whether it's effective or not, but to understand how to make it more effective. So if you're a teacher, or if you're a teacher educator, or if you're organizing professional development opportunities for teachers, or indeed for teacher educators, then it's essential reading. So we will be in touch with all of you with the details about how you can download that report, and we'd be very interested interested in your feedback on it as well, and how these key insights are reflected in your country. And the responses that we've had from community of practice leaders and also from teachers who are part of their COPs about these insights. Very, very interesting, and I think this is a key point about one of the themes that runs throughout the Teacher Networking Initiative, which is about what does the evidence, not just what does the evidence say, what does the research say, but what does it actually mean for us? And I think that what we've looked at today in responses from Marwa, from Inas, from Masuma, Khalid, and Mariam is, you know, what do these key insights actually mean? Do they make sense? And I think that's, in a sense, if I've got homework, I think that's perhaps suggested homework for yourselves, that when you read the report, then you've got to be asking yourself the question, what does this make sense to me? What kind of difference is it going to make to me? So that was the first question that we asked. And the second question we asked was around the whole issue of the digital divide and about supporting teachers who have limited or no internet connection. Well, I don't know about the rest of you, but I was truly inspired by the stories that our colleagues from the Sudan, from Yemen, from Iraq told us about. And thank you so much, Reymaz and Raja and Mohammed and Ahmed and Arabia, for sharing your stories with us today. And as many of you wrote in the comments, not just inspirational, but a kind of confirmation, if we needed any confirmation, I suppose, that teachers are heroes and not only deliver excellent lessons for their learners, but also take the opportunity to develop themselves in really challenging situations. We saw 2 photographs of the Yemen and one of the Sudan, which really collectively encapsulate the kinds of conditions that many teachers are faced with. And I think that from that session, from that panel discussion, just to reinforce 2 points, I think, that are very important for us for the future. The first is about not contributing to this growing divide between teachers who are connected and teachers who are not connected, between learners and parents who are connected and learners and parents who are not connected. And that associated with that, we need to take, I would argue very strongly, personal responsibility. We can make sure we can lobby the government, state to invest more in education. Of course, that's something that we should do. There are organizations out there that can help, but personally, what is it exactly that we are doing as individuals to make sure that no teacher is left behind? And if you could go to the, if you could just advance the slide, about 5 slides, Tema, I'm sorry. Just to the beginning of session number 2, please. Okay, and the next one. Thank you very much indeed. This is a quote from Steve's report from a teacher educator in the region. And I think, for me anyway, when I saw this quote, it provides the perfect link, in a sense, between the research and what we should do practically with that research. That this is a very strong message that comes out. I want to help my colleagues. We've talked about psychological support. We've talked about the fact of being together in isolating circumstances. We've talked about buddying. We've talked about solidarity across countries. We've talked about comparisons and reflections that go beyond a very simple country focus or a very simple individual focus. And that's a key message that we think is very important, that we're trying to pursue through the Teacher Networking Initiative. It's one of collaborative learning. And ultimately the success of the initiative is going to be really evaluated on whether or not we are able as a community to come together and to make sense of what's just happened and what is happening, to make sense of the opportunities and the constraints, to make sense of the digital divide, to make sense of our new role as remote deliverers of teaching excellence. So to help us make sense of all of that, both from a theoretical point of view, from a research point of view, but importantly from a very, very practical point of view. We are practitioners. It's our job to help learners develop their English language skills in the classroom, whether it's a remote or face-to-face classroom. So ultimately, it's about what we do together that will help us practically to be more effective practitioners. And finally, then, and if you could advance to the slide for the final session, Tema. Okay, Asil says it so wonderfully, the journey is never ending. It's not a particularly straight line that aeroplane is taking. Not sure what the pilot has been thinking about, but it's very true, isn't it? That there are stops and starts, there are bends and curves. There's going forward, there's going backwards, there's looping the loop on that journey, and we are set to continue our journey together through the Teacher Networking Initiative. We have our homework, which is to make sense of the suggestions that you've made for the next Ask Hala webinar series. We've got our homework, which is to make all of the content that we've looked at so far. We've had 8 webinars and 8 COP leader sessions and 2 online conferences, to make all of that learning and all of that sharing available so that we can review it, we can learn from it and build on it for a better future together, and a more collaborative future together, and a future together that includes, we would argue very strongly, a component of remote teaching and learning. So please stay with us on the journey. Please help us to build the journey together, map out the route, and finally, thank you everybody that's been with us today, the team, Nora and Temar and Hala, the presenters who've been with us today, Steve, Marwa, Inas, Masuma, Khalid, Mariam, thank you so much indeed. Reymaz, Raja, Mohammed, Ahmed and Arabia, thank you so much. Asil, great job there, really coordinated that so supremely well. Talib, Neda, Nisha, Shahar, thank you so much, and apologies if I've forgotten anybody there. It's been great. And finally, thank you to all of you who've joined us this morning. I hope you found the sessions useful and inspiring, and we will be in touch very, very soon with all of the things, all of our homework, and we hope to get good marks for our homework in the future. Any final comments, Nora or Hala or Tema?
I'd like to thank every one of you, the organizing team and the speakers, Steve, and I look forward to cycle 2 of the COP programs and the webinars.
Yes, some final comments from my side, John and the colleagues. And speaking of the changing the mindset and the attitudes, and Well, according to the poll that we've done earlier, perhaps prior to the conference and in session 1, I can see some indicators, good indicators around the changing attitudes and behaviors and mindsets towards the online and the remote teaching. There was consensus that participants have become better users of online tools, and the focus of becoming an online teacher has been in the center of their CPD, and there was also a great consensus that when schools reopen, we will not go back to the way we were before. So thank you very much for this. It's really reassuring and definitely will help us build on what we've done so far towards better and effective remote programs.
Lovely. So thank you very much. Have a great afternoon and a lovely weekend, and we'll be in touch very shortly. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.